Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be answering some of the really fundamental questions about smart home tech, like why would you even want a smart home? And if you're going to start building a smart home, why would you use Apple Home? These questions and many more come from the great mind of my partner, who has asked me all of these questions a million times while I've been building my smart home. And so I'm going to share the answers to these questions with you today. Why is that? Because the answers to these questions are something that I built up over several years building my own smart home now. And I think the answers to them are really important if you're going to start building your own smart home. There are certain things that I wish I knew years ago when I first bought my first Philips Hue bulbs. Now my smart home is a completely different beast, and I want to share some of that knowledge with you guys to help you get started on your journey. So without further ado, let's get into the first question.
What's the point in all this smart home stuff?
So the answer to that, as with everything, is quite subjective. The main reason I like smart home technology is a blend of laziness and efficiency. For me, I really like being able to control any device anywhere in my home without having to get up or move around at all. I can just take my phone out of my pocket and turn anything anywhere on or off, or by just asking Siri. The other aspect of having a smart home that I really enjoy is automation. In my opinion, the whole point of a smart home is to automate as much as possible. Every single day I come up with new ideas of things that I can automate that just save me so much time and money.
Why would you use Apple Home for that?
Probably the biggest reason I chose to use Apple Home is admittedly because I was already deep into the Apple ecosystem when they launched their smart home platform. But when they announced Apple Home, the thing that drew me in the most was the fact that all communication is 100% local.
What does local even mean?
In this context, local means that all the communications between your devices is happening without having to go via the wider internet. This is good for several reasons. It makes things much quicker, and it makes things much more reliable. It also means you can make things much more secure. For example, you could unplug your phone line from your router, and as long as it kept broadcasting its Wi-Fi and your phone remained connected, you'd still be able to control every device in your Apple Home. And even better than that, your automations would continue to run because your Home Hub is your Apple TV or your HomePod, which is also on your local network, and everything would continue to run just as quickly without skipping a beat.
Are there any other reasons you particularly like Apple Home?
The next biggest reason I like Apple Home personally is it makes everything super simple. Everything from adding a new device just involves pressing the plus button in the Home app and pointing your camera at a QR code or even tapping it on the device to get it paired. And then it walks you through all of the remaining steps to deciding how to control a device. What I mean by that is, before Apple Home, anytime you wanted to control a smart home device, you had to remember who makes that device and go to their app to control it. With Apple Home, any device that supports it can be controlled from within one app. It unifies all the manufacturers into one place. So whenever you want to control something, you just open the Home app or even ask Siri to do it.
But is it affordable?
So as it currently stands, Apple Home is probably the most expensive ecosystem to get into. That's partly due to it being a bit of an Apple tax, and partly because it is actually more expensive for product manufacturers to develop for Apple Home. And that is in part because of the very stringent standards that Apple have on privacy and security, which requires extra work from a programming perspective and sometimes from a hardware perspective. But thankfully, a new protocol is coming along called Matter, and that aims to solve all of this.
Hang on a minute. What is Matter?
Okay, Matter is the new smart home standard. It takes the idea of what I just described in Apple Home a step further. Apple Home already unifies the different product manufacturers into one app. Well, Matter takes this a step further by unifying all of those ecosystems. The idea being that a product manufacturer can put all their effort into developing one smart home communication language, and that will then work on any smart home ecosystem, whether you're on Apple Home, Google Home, Amazon Alexa, it doesn't matter. No pun intended. Now, the reason this is great for you as the customer is that as soon as you see that Matter logo, you can be pretty confident that that product is going to work in whichever smart home ecosystem you choose to use. And in fact, it will work across multiple at once. So if you use Apple Home and your partner wants to use Google Home, then you can both set up that product in both ecosystems and you can both use it from different devices. There is, however, one caveat to that, which I must inform you of because it's a bit of a strange situation. The whole idea of Matter is that it means that you see that logo, you know it will work. But whenever a new Matter release comes out, as version 1.2 has just come out, supporting robot vacuums, it's up to the companies that build that smart home ecosystem to support that new device category. So right now, even though the specification is out that supports robot vacuums, if you bought a robot vacuum that supported Matter, you wouldn't be able to use it in any smart home ecosystem because the ecosystems haven't caught up to the Matter spec. I suspect, for example, that Apple will support the robot vacuums device category sometime in the next couple of months, whereas the likes of Google Home still don't even support the version 1 specification fully, because if you buy a Matter supported button right now, Google Home will let you add it but won't let you do anything with it. It's a bit crazy and it's creating a bit of a new problem, but eventually that button will work because the ecosystem should eventually catch up. So in the meantime, if you're running multiple ecosystems, at least that button will be useful for one of you. Now there's still an advantage to this because as long as you're running an ecosystem in your home that supports the device category, you can still set that button up to do something within that ecosystem. It just might mean that you can't do it within Google Home right now, for example. There's one other advantage to you as the consumer as well. Because of the reduction in development costs for the manufacturer, in theory, we should start to get cheaper and cheaper options on the market for ecosystems that previously were quite expensive, like Apple Home. What that means is that product manufacturers that bring cheap products to the market can develop their product for one specification and it will be supported across all ecosystems, bringing down the cost for you as the consumer.
Okay, now that Matter's coming, would you switch ecosystem?
As I just talked about, one of the great things about Matter is that you can run a product in multiple ecosystems at once. So there would kind of be no point ever switching ecosystem. You could simply run one ecosystem alongside the existing one if it had a feature that you didn't have in your primary one. So for example, I recently learned that the SmartThings ecosystem allows you to send a text message from some sort of automation trigger. Now currently Apple Home doesn't let you do that. So what I could do is buy a single SmartThings hub and integrate my Matter devices into SmartThings as well, purely for the sake of running that one automation. But all of my Apple Home stuff would continue to work and I could continue to use Siri as my primary voice assistant and I could still use Apple Home as my primary automation platform. You don't have to stick to one ecosystem anymore.
What is your favourite product within your Apple Home?
That's a super tricky question. I've got so many great devices throughout my home that it would be tough to pick just one, but I think the most important device is probably something like an Apple HomePod. They are the cheapest way to get into the Apple Home ecosystem with a functional hub for running automations and the like. However, I would recommend, if you're getting started from an automation perspective, to get one of the Apple TVs that has Thread and an Ethernet port, because that makes your automations run much more quickly and reliably. However, as an all-rounder, the reason that the HomePods are great is because they do work as an automation hub, and they're also a great home control device. You can use Siri on them to control any device throughout your home, and also control devices contextually. If you say, turn on the lights, it will turn on the lights in the current room that the HomePod is configured within. So right now I'm in my study. If I said turn on the lights, it would turn on the lights within my study. If I went into my bedroom and I said turn on the lights, it would turn on the lights within the bedroom because that HomePod is configured within my bedroom.
If you went back in time and you were less of a nerd, is there anything you would do differently?
What would I do differently? That is hard to answer, especially trying to put myself in the context of being less of a nerd. But There are definitely differences in what I would purchase product-wise. I think I would start by purchasing a good third-party home app. There are loads out there. Home Plus, Controller for HomeKit is my personal favourite. The main reason that you would want a third-party home app is actually for improving your automations. The Apple Home platform as a whole can do way more than the Apple Home app lets you. For example, you can put multiple conditions on your automations. You can automate things based on triggers that they don't even show you in the Home app, like a water leak sensor detecting a leak or a doorbell button being pressed. These are all things that if you just use the Home app, you won't be able to find a way to do because there isn't one. But if you have a third-party app, it lets you do way more. And the other thing I would do is research the various manufacturer ecosystems a lot more before I bought into them. There are certain manufacturer ecosystems which didn't offer the best value or experience. By the time I gave up with them, I'd spent hundreds of pounds on their products and I just really didn't get along with them in the end. They didn't work well in my home for whatever reason. And then there are other manufacturers that I bought into later that seem to tick all the boxes of cheap, reliable, good-looking products that were easy to set up and really easy and reliable to use that I held off on buying into for a long time, mainly because I didn't want another smart home hub in my home. I'm pretty much allergic to hubs other than Apple Home hubs, which is probably a topic for another video. But there are product manufacturers whose ecosystems I didn't buy into just because I didn't want another hub in my home. But once I pulled the trigger on one of their hubs and one of their contact sensors, I fell in love with their products. And now I've probably got 30 or more of their products dotted around my home and they work so flawlessly, I really wish I knew about them sooner. These are the sorts of lessons that I hope to pass on to you guys over the course of my future videos. I think I can save you a lot of time and money in building up your smart home. And one final more specific note on things that I wish I knew sooner, because this one is really key. Don't ever make something more difficult than it was. And the prime example of this are smart light bulbs. They're really easy and cheap to get into when it comes to the smart home world, but they're a pain, especially if you live with anyone. It is almost impossible if you have a non-techie person in your household or kids to convince them not to flick light switches. And as soon as they turn off the light switch at the wall, the bulb no longer has power and you can no longer turn it on from your smart app of choice. You still have to get up, go flick the switch back on, wait for it to reconnect, and then you control it. And you're never ever going to convince those non-techie people that it's easier to pull out their phone to control a light than flicking a switch. So in that case, smart switches are a much better solution. I personally use smart switches over the majority of my house. I only use smart bulbs in places where I actually make use of the dimming and colour functionalities. In those cases, I actually have the bulbs permanently wired live, and then I still install something behind the switch that allows me to treat the switch like a button. And the ultimate result of that is that I need to make an automation that says when the switch is flicked on, turn on the light, and vice versa. And that may sound like a lot of bother to you, but giving people the same original control they had over every accessory is a massive value in the long run, trust me.
Are there any downsides to using Apple Home which might put me off, or smart home tech in general?
As with anything, the answer is very personal to you. It might depend on how many techie people you have in your house versus sort of technophobic people. For me, I'm the only techie one in my house. My partner really isn't, and my kids aren't old enough to be techie or not yet. There were definite downsides at very many points that my partner will tell you. However, if you follow my channel, you can learn from the lessons and the mistakes that I've made, and you can avoid them yourself. The example that I just gave of smart bulbs and smart switches are a prime one. If you have non-techie people in your household, the most important thing you can do is have a solution to those downsides in advance. This may mean saving up a little bit more money for a second device or a better device, but it's worth it in the long run and will save you money on buying cheaper products or more convenient ones that actually turn out to be less convenient. A great example of this is a robot that I have which attaches to my curtain rod and opens and closes the curtains. A really important aspect of that is it has a feature called tug and go. So you can tug the curtain and pull it across like you normally would, and then the robot continues along the track to open the curtain or close it. If my partner could not just pull the curtain, that device would not be approved. And the same goes for all of my light switches. You can use every light switch in my house as normal. But I also have automations which turn the lights on and off for you, so we never actually need to use them. So, as with anything, there are downsides, but there are also solutions to all of those problems. So in summary, I'll leave it up to you whether you get into the smart home game and whether or not you use the Apple ecosystem to do that. You might even decide to use a combination of ecosystems so that you and your partner can both use their preferred ecosystem of choice now that Matter is coming along. Either way, I hope the questions in this video and the answers I gave you were in some way helpful on choosing what you want to do. Now please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you value my content. Also, go to my website, howtohomekit.uk, to find my other social channels. And if you really value my content and you have the means to do so, please consider supporting me using the links on my website. There are Amazon affiliate links to all the products that I use, which will give me a small commission at no extra cost to you. I've also got my Patreon at the bottom of the page, and you can buy me a one-off coffee using the Monzo link right there next to my Patreon. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you found it helpful, and remember, home is where the smart is. See you in the next one.